guys, welcome. I want to welcome you to the MAET Bridge Seminar Series on Technologies to Assist Learning. Today our conversation is going to focus on meeting the diverse needs of our students with assistive technologies, particularly through the lens of UDL. You can converse with us live on Twitter with the hashtag MAETBridge. You can also go to the website bridge.educ.msu.edu and watch this live broadcast and also converse with us with our Titan Pad. My name is Jason Allen. I'll be your host for today. I am a museum educator here in Michigan. With me today is my co-host, Tracy Marshall, and she can introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Tracy Marshall, as Jason said. I'm currently a full-time student in the Master of Educational Technology program at MSU. Previously, I've worked for over 10 years at Henry Ford College, teaching campus and online classes in the field of world religion.
Perfect. Also with us today is Emily Fitzpatrick, who will be monitoring our background. She can introduce herself also.
Hello, I'm Emily Fitzpatrick. I'm also a student in the Masters in Educational Technology program at MSU. I will be monitoring our back channel. You can follow that on our Titan Pad, which is at bridge.educ.msu.edu, or using Twitter with the hashtag MAETBridge.
And then finally, we have Ashley Chrumka, who's going to be doing all of our production stuff.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Ashley Chrumka, and I'm entering my 6th year of teaching upper elementary school, and I've really been enjoying my experience as a Spartan.
And we have a lovely bunch of experts to help us here today. The first I'm going to introduce is Gordon Sasaki. He is an educator at the MoMA, and I'll let him give a second to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Gordon Sasaki. I am an educator and artist at the Museum of Modern Art here in New York City. I'm looking forward to our in-depth conversation on UDL.
Perfect. We also have Deborah Margolis, who's joining us from MSU in the libraries.
Hi there. My name is Deborah Margolis. I'm so glad to be with you guys today. I have a number of responsibilities at this library, and one of them is as our liaison to the Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities on campus. And in general, I am the point person at the MSU libraries for services to people with disabilities within the libraries. And I've worked with disabilities services in libraries for, I think, about 15 years.
Perfect. And we also have Yalonda Combs joining us today.
Hi, I'm Yalonda Combs, and I am actually in the MAET program with these lovely other students from Michigan State University, and I am an educator at Mason High School. I'm in the visual arts department, and I am going into my 8th year of teaching visual arts.
Thank you. So before we get started, I wanted to kind of define what UDL is, Universal Designs for Learning. I was wondering if, Gordon, if you could weigh in and just give us a kind of brief definition of what you think UDL is.
UDL is a framework that enables really curriculum developers to kind of connect with as broad range of population as possible, not specifically just students, but really everybody, and not also particularly disability oriented, but really best practices for all audiences.
Perfect. I wanted to give each of our presenters a chance to kind of talk about how UDL has either impacted their lives in terms of professional or personal, and I'll let Deborah go with that one real quick if she'd like to.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I've had a variety of experiences with disabilities over the years, but I think my most profound experience was working with a fellow librarian at an academic library who he himself had a learning disability, and learning through his eyes what he had to do, how hard he had to work to do what he does. And he's, a star librarian. And so really learning some of the different technologies he uses to organize stuff, to write and read. And we can talk more about those technologies later. And then, so I think having that personal experience with a friend or family member really gives you, opens your eyes if you yourself don't have a disability of some kind. And so that's my personal part of it. So I'll give it over to somebody else.
Yeah, Yolanda, actually, I think that can go right into Yolanda's personal experiences if she wants to give us some information about that.
Sure. I actually, in school, younger person, of course, always knew that I had some issues with being able to read and decode very well. Started in first grade when I went from the highest reading level, and mid-year when they switched classes around, found out I was having very strong issues with being able to decode the alphabet, and went from highest level to lowest level, and that was a huge shock to me. It doesn't feel very good, but I found as I was in school, it was about middle school age, I had a new teacher that came into the school system, did some testing with me, didn't have a formal title, but she started giving me some extra help, a little bit like really UDL is set up, giving me some things that were specific for my learning needs, and I did very well in school, graduated on the Honor Society in high school, have done really well through college. When I went to Spring Arbor University, took a differentiated learning class, and immediately found out that there were some services out there that I didn't know about earlier in my life, where I was able to go to the Resource Center and get all my books on tape, and helped me tremendously get through my classes with ease, just like the rest of my peers. And then last year, as I started the educational technology, I knew that in school, I was finding myself students that needed help with certain things, and I didn't know how to use the technology piece really very well. And so I thought for me, working on a master's program in this would be a good thing. And I actually benefited from that also. I was able to get a MacBook, and the MacBook reads to me. The MacBook can do some nice corrections for me. So I have found it very helpful in both my educational and my professional and private areas of my life.
Yeah, so you've actually had direct influence from new technologies assisting you in learning.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Gordon have a second, because I know he does a lot with just assisting others a lot of times in informal learning, because working at a museum, get a lot of opportunities for that. So let Gordon talk a little bit about what he's able to do.
Well, as a wheelchair user myself, I connect really with some of Ron Mace's ideas about universal design, where he's talking about access to really architecture, but using that kind of as a I guess a means of kind of getting into more accessible curriculum development. And I think that's the whole basis of CAST. I work with a very broad range of individuals, really from 6 to 106, and every possible disability or ability that you can, list. One of the things that I really enjoy is coming at it as an artist and using kind of creative approaches to connect with people at different levels, because, I mean, if you really think about it, we all are different types of learners. We all excel in different areas, and it's just a matter of kind of thinking about, well, how can I tap into those areas of expertise that all of us have to enable learning, really.
I know, working at the MoMA, you do a lot with art, being an artist yourself. I know you have a lot of programs like Meet Me at the MoMA. I don't know if everyone knows about that. Actually, Gordon, you're probably much more a better person to describe that to us than I would be. But could you describe Meet Me at the MoMA real quick, just a real brief?
Absolutely. Meet Me at MoMA began in 2004, and it's a program specifically designed for individuals with dementia or Alzheimer's. And it meets once a month. It's basically a drop-in structure. People can come whenever they can. We do ask that they register. The program itself runs for 2 hours, and what we do is we actually use artwork that kind of triggers memories and conversations into individuals. And oftentimes with dementia and Alzheimer's, the long-term memory is the last to go. So, you know, a lot of times these images, particularly for New Yorkers, they have a very personal connection with these images from their childhood or from their youth, where they had come with, you know, their parents or whomever. And oftentimes conversations develop out of these images, and that's really what we try and do, is we try and use conversation as kind of a vehicle to learn.
Fantastic. I know that informal learning environments a lot of times have a lot more freedom than a school would have. And I know Deborah, working at a library, might be able to speak to that a little bit also. How do you use assistive technologies, or just UDL period, at the library to just kind of help a broad audience?
Okay. Well, I guess I can think of a lot of different ways. I mean, when we're designing, you know, library spaces, we really try to consider the range of users, you know, and my job is to keep an eye out for the needs of people with disabilities in particular. You know, when you're designing a space and ordering furniture, you're thinking about the heights of things and who can access things. Can everybody access, you know, this shelf of books, for example? You know, so it could be, or even if you're not like designing a whole new area with a lot of, you know, if you're not doing a big project, which I can talk to you about a really neat project I did, but something very simple is that at our, you know, research library, we have these new bookshelves that are, it's a pretty popular place where faculty, probably in particular, go to see like the newest stuff that's coming out, because we do still get, you know, print books in the library, even though much of what we provide now is online digital information. We still get print books. So for people that can read print books, I, you know, noticed that the new bookshelves were kind of high, and if you were in a wheelchair, you really wouldn't be able to access some of those books or even see, you know, read the titles. So the folks who put those books out every week, you know, now have just moved and using a lower shelf. So it could be a very simple solution, not requiring technology in particular, though there are some really fantastic technologies that people that are, you know, blind, with learning disabilities in particular, really benefit from. And I don't know, maybe talk, I don't know if you'd like me to talk later about a renovation of a children's area at the Library for the Blind in Baltimore, the Maryland State Library for the Blind. I can tell you a little bit about that now or later. So.
Well, I was going to say, before we move on to that, because I would like to hear about it, interesting thing about the digitizing things, making them more accessible. Working at
okay, sure.
I know a lot of people will say that by making something digital, isn't it accessible to everyone now? Which I'll let you go.
Right. Oh yeah. So no, it's not necessarily. Especially if you like scan in PDFs and just, you know, putting them up online. A lot of times they're not accessible to blind people who use screen readers, or other people maybe with learning disabilities who are having each word on the screen read to them by a computer program. If it's like a scanned image and hasn't been scanned using the OCR, optical character recognition technology, then it's just like a blank page. So if you're just like, oh, I'll just scan that in and put that up on my whatever course management software, it really often doesn't work. The other, let's see, format that's often inaccessible is video. So like everybody's creating videos now, like little YouTube videos to explain things, teach things, or whatever. But if you're not sighted, you can't see what's going on. Even if there is sound, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that would need to be described in captions. So the captioning of videos is really important, and people often forget that. So it's an extra step that you really need to bring in. And then, if you're then providing a caption or a transcript, then, it's another mode to access it. So you can access that information with just the text. And again, people that are using some kind of screen reader or can access that. But then it also becomes more accessible in other ways, like, sighted people might use it to search for a certain word in a document that you couldn't do if it was just a video. So making things accessible for people with disabilities in mind usually makes it more accessible to everyone. So the videos and the captioning is a really big issue, and scanning of PDFs is a big issue that you need to think about. And as far as libraries go, so we now provide all this access to ebooks and databases where you search for articles and such. We need to be vigilant that those products that we're buying on behalf of users are accessible in terms of, being able to be read aloud via like JAWS or Kurzweil is software that's often used by people with learning disabilities. So here at our library, we actually have a project where we test some of these commonly used products for ebooks or access to articles. We make sure that people with screen readers can actually access that information, because libraries like ours spend millions of dollars. I mean, that's how like I said, we still buy books, but really where we're spending our resources is on the digital information. So we do test these products, and we do find things that are not accessible in them, and then we can communicate with the vendors to make improvements.
So the idea is to then provide the same information just in multiple formats.
Exactly. That's ideal if you can do that. Otherwise, like Yalonda said, students that get material via printed textbooks, they would have to have usually some kind of resource center, media center that's responsible for that on a campus or in a school, then convert that information to audio or digital format so that it could be accessed. So if we can make it accessible to everyone up front, that's much preferred than going through these extra steps. And then often those students have to wait, to get the information, and they're not getting an equal educational experience if the teacher, and again, now I'm in a university situation, if the professor just puts up this PDF and they can't get to it and they have to contact so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and get it reformatted, there's a time lag, and that's not fair in helping them, be on the same level with other students.
Awesome. That actually, I think, applies, because right now we've been talking a lot about informal learning environments like museums and libraries. Since we have a lot of teachers out there listening, I was going to go to Yalonda to see if she wanted to weigh in on what you had just talked about and how that applies to teachers in terms of needing multiple formats for students to be able to learn. So I'll let Yalonda.
Yeah, Jason, and it's funny because, in the class of the master's class that we're taking right now, I've tried to do a lot of my own footwork because I feel like I know something, and then Deborah, like you said, I've gotten some PDFs that will read some words, but then actually spell out some words, and it doesn't make any sense at all. Thankfully, our information has not been so overwhelming that I can't just stop the reader and actually do the reading myself. But what takes a typical person maybe 15 minutes to read would probably take me about an hour to read, because I'm not just decoding the words out loud, but then I have to process those words of what their meaning is, and at a graduate level, you really have to, it's almost like multitasking, and none of us are good, really, truly at multitasking. So it is interesting, but for my own students at school, that's what I have found. I've used actually Evernote for all of my tests and quizzes, and then my Evernote is then put onto my school website, and they're able to access the reader from the iPads in my classroom, and anything can be read, and it's something that I know of the student, and they don't have to feel like they are any different than anyone else, because someone may be listening to their music while they're drawing, and someone else is actually rereading the targets that I've set for them, and it's been so successful this past year. It's been pretty phenomenal.
I wonder then, if you're a teacher and you already have a lesson created, and then you start to think more and more about how you can make it accessible to everyone, do you know any ways that you could then start to incorporate UDL or assistive technologies into a lesson that's already planned?
I do that. Actually, after I took got my certification last summer, I began changing over all of my lessons that way. And UDL doesn't mean, just a visual disorder of any kind, but like what Gordon said, if there is a lesson that I'm using a particular material, and I've had students with some emotional needs or disorders that they don't like the feel of what a certain material is, then I will provide gloves that they can put on so that their hands don't have to feel the oil pastel, or that clay that feels sticky and they just can't stand having their hands dirty. The gloves are that assistive technology that comes into play. Technology doesn't necessarily mean the internet. It's just the source of what you're using to make it better for that person. And it's really more exciting, I think, as a teacher. It's almost like you're an investigator. Just because you're making a project different, it doesn't mean that everybody needs it. So just because the student that has issues with touch wears gloves, the whole class doesn't have to have gloves. So does that answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that same subject about taking previously made lessons, or even just subjects, and kind of incorporating UDL into them? I don't know if you've experienced that, Deborah, or...
Sure. I just had a question for you, Yalonda, though. So what you were saying with the Evernote and the MacBook, so right. You said targets, was that sort of like your, because I'm not a teacher and I haven't been trained that, what did you mean by targets? Is that like your instructions to them on what they're supposed to do in that lesson?
Everything that I have on my website, I have found that Evernote's been a really good source for me. I have their syllabus on there. I have the expectation and project schedule linked to Evernote. I have all of our quizzes and exams, and not everyone uses the iPad for that. For instance, with the exams, when I do an exam on it, I have to shut off all the other sources because all of my units are actually attached to the Evernote, but they all have to be shut off so that only the access of the exam. Otherwise, students that are pretty tech savvy could actually pull information while they're taking a quiz or an exam. So, and I mean, that's all by trial and error, because I found somebody doing that when they were doing a post-quiz for the color unit. I'm like, what are you doing? But why are you on the unit, why are you on the unit project for you've got all the answers for color unit. Why are you looking at? Well, because I'm trying to get this answer. Okay, but I'm trying to assess what you know, not what the computer knows. So, and it's just trial and error. So on my website, I have the the button that I have to push so that it's not seen. A particular area is not seen, and only the quiz or the assessment that I'm looking at is on. And I do keep it on my screen in the room, so I have a full screen. Not everybody will use the iPad. I also have a handout with the physical paper. Some students prefer that. And then the students that are really needing some reading, they don't have to have a teacher educator that's coming in to help them anymore to read to them. They can sit right at their desk just like all the other students, and they can step by step go through each of the questions and then reread the question and then reread the answers until they choose the answer that they want. So, but I'm sure there's 1,000 other ones out there, but Evernote was the one that we were introduced to last year, and I just started playing with it a little bit, and it's been really, really helpful for me to use that.
So that's a way that you can provide the same information to students in multiple formats, I guess. They can see it on the big screen, they can listen to it on their computer, they can see it on their computer, they can...
I have a physical copy, yep. And when I'm doing a pre-test or a post-test, the beginning of the year is always, or the trimester, whichever I'm starting, that's probably the most cumbersome because there are students that don't always want to let me know they need that. And so post-test or pre-test is fine because even if they don't do very well, it's a pre-test. So if I notice then afterwards, did you really, you were able to get through this well? Well, no, I really couldn't hardly read it at all. You need to come in at lunchtime then so that I can retest you to have a better knowledge of it. So, but as the year goes on, I know who needs it. So I have several different choices for them to choose from, and when we come in and do a pre-test or post-test, whatever it is that we're doing, I have all the different places that people are going to use it, and then I have some students that I know do not need to use an iPad, and I don't allow them to use it. There are some students that do that because they're the high-tech people that know what to do, and they know they don't have to study if they can figure out a way to block into what I've had blocked off. They know how to do that. So. And I'm just very aware of it. I walk around the room. I make sure that everyone has what they need, and it makes it, makes it really interesting. And I really feel like I'm able to get some true assessments that way too.
Awesome. Deborah, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Oh, I can add a little bit about programming I've done for children in libraries. So when I was not in the university library, I worked in public libraries and the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. I was the youth services coordinator, or children teen librarian, and so that was an informal learning environment where we would I would host and lead children's programs, and so there I really thought about how I could take a kind of story time program and make it more accessible to a variety of children with, primarily visual disabilities, but they could have multiple disabilities, they could be on the autism spectrum, all that. So I had, I would basically, add other sensory elements. Adding a lot more touch, though Yalonda just said sometimes you have to be careful of touch because some students are really sensitive to not wanting to touch certain things. But everything was always optional, of course, in the library program. But I had a lot of fabrics that kids could touch that I would pair with a story. We would do a lot with taking, if you had a regular picture book or chapter book, how can you really make that come alive through different senses? So you might, really enlarge some of the artwork from a picture book to make sure that everybody could see it. You might describe it verbally. You might, again, have some fabric or some texture that they could feel that would help them feel the, you know, tall grass or the carrot, you know. So there's so many, you know, children's books that you can really adapt to be multi-sensory or add other sensory elements to really enrich the experience, and that enriches the experience for any kids. I mean, how much more fun, you know, if you went to just like a regular story time, but then you got to, you know, plant a carrot seed and touch the carrot with the ends and sing, and so that was I'm missing that job a little right now, because that was really a lot of fun to plan creative programs and adapt materials. Another thing that I think Yalonda might have touched upon was, in a way, would be, you know, allowing more time for students to process information if they need it. So that would be one thing that I might add in that I might not have thought about before I started working with people with disabilities. And so I guess those are just some examples of kind of children's programming in the library, or it's similar to children's programming that might be done in a museum as well.
Yeah. I liked you guys have a lot of fantastic examples, and a lot of it seems to connect to like the arts in schools and tactile touching,
absolutely,
things like that. I was going to let Gordon talk for a second, because I kind of wanted to know, a lot of times I feel like when we talk about UDL, they talk specifically about arts and things like that. Can you talk at all about why we use arts in UDL?
Well, I think one of the reasons why CAST has adopted this kind of art framework is because the arts are so plastic and adaptable to the individual. The arts kind of wrap themselves around the individual as opposed to forcing the individual to adapt to a specific environment. It's really up to us as, I guess, presenters or teachers to kind of think about that environment and how we can make the lesson plan as multi-leveled or more multi-formatted as possible to make really broad connections. Getting back to that idea of redesigning lessons, I think it's really important to kind of point out that chances are the teachers, classroom teachers, are already doing a lot of UDL. And oftentimes it's just a matter of kind of thinking about different audiences and, like Deborah was saying, using different kind of sensory input and possibilities of expression to make those lesson plans much more UDL.
Can you think of any, so if someone was having difficulty incorporating UDL into either lessons or programs, regardless if it's a school or a museum or a library or anything like that, do you know any resources that people could use to help them incorporate that?
Well, the CAST website is excellent. I'm sure we'll give that very shortly. And also the UDL Center. There's so much information online. I would highly recommend starting with that.
Actually, I don't know a lot about CAST. Can you actually describe that real quick?
CAST is the Center for Applied Special Technologies, and I always think, you know, it's such an interesting acronym because it sounds like they should be making rocket engines or something. They're based out in Massachusetts, and one of the things really, I mean, their cornerstone is education. It's about learning. And they really are the developers of the whole UDL framework.
And I can interject something. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that's Ann Myers and David Rose.
And as for the CAST website and the UDL, the whole breakdown of UDL, we tweeted out a concept map that shows the entire UDL in one image, which is really a nice tool, and actually I think it employs a UDL principal itself by creating a map of itself. Because when you start, the UDL is based on a principle, and then it gets more refined in a guideline, and then even more refined in a checklist. And I found it just amazing to go point by point and go deeper and deeper into the guidelines and then into the checklist. And the CAST website has amazing examples right there as links that you can click on and try out. And as an educator, I don't think I would have ever taken the time to go step by step by step through that. But in prep for this webinar, that's one thing that I wanted to do. But now I think almost every educator should do that, because it, even if you think that you're intuitively doing a lot of things, which I think a lot of good teachers already do, once you go through the checkpoints point by point, it's just really amazing at how much deeper you could then go, how much deeper you could push yourself. That will benefit all of your students and marginalize nobody. You know, how great would it be for a classroom not to have any students that are marginalized in any way? So I just wanted to throw that out there, as I would encourage educators to take, you know, an hour or 2 hours to just explore what's there on the CAST website, because I think it's very well spelled out and easily to understand material that I think can be beneficial to every educator.
I know last year in the certification program, we actually did take, it was from our MAET project, and we used the UDL format, and what I thought I was doing pretty good, it helped me again to recheck some of those areas that we have a tendency, if there's something that we maybe have an issue in, that it's easier to find, but when you open that base to all learners, you begin to think of, and it's pretty easy to quickly come up with some answers, because if you have a problem, I think we all have little detectives within us, and we go, oh, well, this would be a great solution for that, but it probably wouldn't be thought of if you don't use something as a guideline. So Tracy, I think that was an awesome idea. If really educators would take it not as an extra added step, but just as part of the steps of preparing, it gets easier and easier, I think.
Absolutely.
I was just going to mention, thank you for that. That sounds like a great website. I can't wait to look at it. But with the concept mapping, it sounds like concept mapping is something most teachers are familiar with, and software for that, because that's one technology that I've found that some people with learning disabilities use to help organize their ideas. Like some really super creative people have trouble just organizing their ideas, so the concept mapping software helps them kind of get all their ideas out there into different bubbles, and that they can move around the bubbles and make it into an outline. So would people already be familiar with that software? Like Inspiration is one that's or Inspiration is the one that's marketed to kids, right? And
yeah.
Or to teachers and families. And then there's a free one that I'm aware of on the internet is bubble.us, bubbl.us, but maybe there are others that you guys are using more often. I'm curious.
Webspiration is one that I just read about on the UDL on the CAST website. Okay. It was similar to the Inspiration or Teacherspiration, the one that you spoke of, but it's called Webspiration.
Okay.
I know there's another one that has SpiderNet. I've used it before. That's kind of fun.
I like all the conversation about specific tools that we can use. We did have a question a little while ago from Twitter that I kind of wanted to talk about. Someone asked, how can we help kids at the middle school and high school level in really challenging content-based courses? And how can we use UDL for that? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
You know, I have to grab my my power cord. My battery's going to run out. I'll be right back.
Okay. Then.
Can I just say, I think it really is up to the teachers, and this is what I have found. Being in my school, my daughter actually is going to be a sophomore next year, and she's also had some issues with some reading things. And I went to her history teacher last year and just asked, you know, do you have your history book on any type of a reader? And he said, oh, I have no idea. I think we do. And here there was an offering at the library that very few people really knew about. So it's so hard because I know all teachers are so busy, and yet if we have a better understanding of what the education is, it no longer becomes that one-size-fits-all mentality. And I think especially maybe I'm incorrect about this, so you guys, you other teachers out there, tell me what you think. But at a high school level, especially even like AP classes, some of the upper level classes, it's kind of like, this is the way I'm teaching it, and you either get it or you sink. And I just really think at any level that you're learning in, there should always be multi areas of learning that process that should fit so many different people. So education of teachers, and we don't get a lot of time for that. You know, PD doesn't often focus in on that. I know our last 2 years in my school, a lot of it has been our data projections and making sure that all students are passing, but yet the tools to help them do that is a little unclear, and this would be a great answer for that, I think.
I'll just follow up with a couple of resources for audiobooks, because people with reading disabilities or visual impairment may really benefit from audiobooks. So if you're talking about kind of classic books that they're reading in middle school or high school, so some of them could be available just through your regular public library as an audiobook, either on a CD, or now they have like downloadable audiobooks through the public library, so that's one place to check. Then for people that have documented learning disabilities or who are blind or visually impaired, there's something called the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, and they provide audiobooks for free to people anywhere across the age span that have those disabilities, so the books could be available that way. And now there's something also called Bookshare. That's a website with free audiobooks and text-based books that could be read by a screen reader or Kurzweil or some screen reading software. It's free to students with disabilities. So Bookshare, and people share, upload the content and share it. So there's a lot on Bookshare now. So that's, those are some resources that are out there, and just in case you're not aware of them. And I know that's just for a certain segment of the population, but there could be other students without diagnosed reading disabilities that might benefit from hearing a book. I mean, I remember, say you're reading a Shakespeare play. I did not get that from just reading it. Okay, I'm 45 now, so I actually went and listened to it on a record in a library. But seriously, then I got it. I understood what was going on. Or dramatic production of a play, a DVD or video. So that's, again, providing it in an additional format can really help a lot of people.
Thanks, I just wrote that down.
Sorry, Jason. One thing I want to mention is on the CAST website, there's a tool, amongst others, called Book Builder. And Book Builder is a wonderful tool that incorporates not only imagery but also text and music. And you can basically, it's kind of a wiki tool that you can use almost any format for teachers that you want to convey to students in a broad variety of ways. And really, you can structure it any way you like. It's very easy to use, and one of the things is that it's free. It's totally free. And it also has multiple language capabilities for ESL learners.
Awesome. We have about 15 minutes left, so I wanted to ask a particular question. So far, we've talked a lot about, UDL and implications for it, and how we can use its specific resources and specific examples and things like that. I know from personal experience, and it hasn't happened through this conversation, but a lot of times when I talk about UDL with other people, other professionals, a lot of times they concentrate solely on the uses for people with disabilities or different abilities. How do you guys think moving forward we can kind of keep the mindset that UDL can be implemented for all learners? It's not just for people with different abilities, it's for everyone, and everyone learns this way. Do you guys have any ideas on how moving forward we can do that?
Well, something that I often say is that really think about it in terms of not the student. If we're unable to make a connection with our students or our audience, I don't feel that the disability is student-based, but it's more curriculum-based. In other words, the lesson plan is disabled, and it's creating a barrier for the student to access. So if we think about it in terms of that, then it begins to kind of address all users.
So I just want to tell everyone who's listening right now, you need to tweet this. Disability is curriculum-based, not student-based. You need to remember that quote. That was fantastic.
That's a good one.
That is good.
I don't know if Deborah wants to add anything or Yalonda.
I'm writing information down that Deborah's told
Yeah,
me.
me too.
I
I was looking at Learning Ally, which somebody shared, and I think that I'm trying to remember whether that's a free or a fee service. But we can check that out later. Sorry.
Well, I know for myself, as a teacher, but also as a lifelong learner, finding some of these, mind you, I went back to school to get my teaching degree about 14 years ago, so I've not been teaching all that long, and this has always been something I've kind of felt like and even in my professional community, if I have educators that I work with watch this, it might be a little bit of an eye-opener, but it's something that I've really always tried to keep pretty quiet until last summer when Professor McMichael really pointed out this isn't something that, you know, somebody has a hand cut off, they're not embarrassed of it. There's no reason why we should feel badly. If you are in a wheelchair, who cares? You just have different legs than I do. So it's helped me to kind of look at things a little differently, and it's also been amazing. I didn't know how to open up email 15 years ago. Maybe like 10 years ago. It hasn't been that long. And now it's just been phenomenal to actually feel like these huge doors are being whooshed open, and I have the same access. I've always been able to read, but I'm so stinking slow at it that it's frustrating. And now I'm like, I'll just put my, my cursor on rabbit mode instead of turtle mode, and I am reading fast as anybody else. And it's amazing. Our brains are computers, and we can pick up that information really quickly. So for me, this has just been truly a wide, eye-opening experience to say, there's things out there, and I know teachers that I have in my school that are so afraid of technology. And, are we afraid of a pencil? Are we afraid of paper? We're not, but that's the way that we communicate. Technology is the same thing, and I think that is where, hopefully, as educators, we can begin to walk into that space and not see it as this, evil entity that has to be so. It has to be guided. It has to be guarded. As parents, we need to, make sure our students and our children are given good resources. But we do the same thing in other areas too. You don't let a kid cross a busy street because they're going to get hurt. So they shouldn't have easy access to the computer on their own at 5 years old and just let them play. So I guess that's the thing that I've seen, that there's so many open doors, and very exciting for the future, I think, in teaching.
I was going to say, I think it's super important for educators to be aware of what resources and options are out there and not be afraid to try new technologies. Because a lot of times, as a teacher, technologies usually aren't made for you, unfortunately. A lot of times you have to adapt them to fit what you want. So that's the great thing about new technologies that come out. They give you multiple options to provide the same information to students. So you can use a lot of new technologies for UDL purposes. And I think that's a really important thing for your educators to understand is you can't be afraid to try new things, because if you wait that long, nothing's ever going to be made for you. It's always for other things that you adapt them.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents on the subject.
That's good.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, both Yolanda and Jason when you start talking about technology and just think about, I've been around and using technology, since it's really for long enough to know that email and everything else, the user interface has become so much more easy. Things are getting much more streamlined. So the technology will always kind of improve with us as we use it. So we can kind of wrap ourselves around that idea.
And if I might add something, when I think about technology and teachers trying to implement it in the amount of time that they have, I think back on something that Yolanda pointed out just now, is that if we think of technology not as this big thing out there to get us that we have to try to control, but we think of it as a tool that we can use to communicate, then I think that takes it down a notch in terms of being intimidated by it. A lot of times, technology comes about because we are trying to communicate with each other and because we're trying to have meaningful connections with other people. And if we look at technology that way, then it just doesn't seem as scary. And I think, especially for teachers who don't have a lot of time to sit there and try to figure it out and try to make connections as to how it will be used the best, it just might be less intimidating for people. It's just all about getting a community together and connecting with somebody.
Right, and I know people, I'm sure time must be just such a huge thing for teachers not having the time to learn some new stuff, but I think the more people can share with each other, even just, one-to-one, like however Yolanda learned about Evernote, probably from another teacher, and then trying it out. I don't know if you guys are able to go observe other teachers that you've heard about are using something effectively. We can also learn from the various specialists that work with the families of I'm talking kids with disabilities here, but you can learn from the families themselves, right? What maybe they're using something at home that you could use in the classroom. Maybe some of the specialists, like vision specialists, have something that you could also try. And so looking at it as more of a community, coming together to try to help students of all kinds.
Perfect. I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I don't know if anyone wanted to add any details that we didn't cover so far that they thought was important to discussing UDL. I wanted to give you guys that option right now if you thought there was something that we didn't hit on that you thought we should have. Okay. I'm going to take that as we're good then. So as a brief overview of what we've talked about so far, when trying to incorporate assistive technologies into schools or education, specifically revolving around universal designs for learning, it's really important to know your audience. So you need to know your students, you need to know their abilities and disabilities, or you need to just, if they're not students, you need to know who's going to be coming to your programs and things like that. For UDL, it's incredibly important to use alternatives. So you need to have multiple options for everyone to be able to learn the best way they're able to. And as Tracy was talking about earlier, it's super beneficial to know the guidelines because there's a lot of information out there that can give you a hand so you know where to start, or if you already have a lesson planned, you can easily change it or adapt it to add UDL within it. It's also very important to try new things, and most importantly from there, you should share the new things you discover. Because other teachers and educators are a community, and they need to know what you found out. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Well, I know I appreciate this, and I'm going to be sharing this particular webinar with my special ed department, because this past year at the end of school, they approached me and asked if I could, you know, help process their program into using more of the iPads. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. But this has been such a phenomenal webinar, and this will be something I'm going to have them certainly watch. So I appreciate that you've focused on something like this. It's such an amazing thing.
Yeah, then before we go, I wanted to ask if you guys had any last-minute resources that you could think of that we hadn't talked about so far that you thought was useful either for people in your profession or educators or teachers to use. If there was just one that you wanted to point out. And I'll let Yalonda first.
Yeah, well, this is pretty lame, but eHow on, you know, on the internet, and Google just how to on a YouTube. They have so many great tutorials, and it's funny because I used to hear people say to me, just Google it, and I'm thinking, oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but I do it all the time now. So, and it gives me answers. It's amazing. So that's probably lame, but that's really still what I'm using because I don't have really a better source. So Deborah and Gordon, you get to tell me some better ones.
Well, I guess I'd ask you to. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Deborah. Sorry.
Okay. I ask you, in addition to Google, you know, if you look at Google, we were talking about teachers and educators and families and other specialists as a community. I mean, those things you're finding out on Google are things that people have put up there. So it's you know, it's part of the community effort to share information. But I hope you guys will also look to your librarians, your school media specialists. If you have one, they can definitely be a support to you. They may, you know, really have some other materials or ideas for use of technology, or, you know, literacy ideas, and just a new face and an exciting, you know, a change to what the students see, and a new partner for you. So that could be your school library media specialist. It could be your public librarian in your area. It could be if you want to reach out, you know, to this network of libraries for the blind. You know, I used to be a librarian at the Library for the Blind, and I used to go to schools and do programming, and so I would be modeling some, you know, sort of multisensory methods. And certainly for those of you who are students in the Masters of Educational Technology program, we hope you'll use your librarians here at Michigan State as resources in terms of finding, you know, scholarly information and, you know, other stuff. So we're here for you guys.
I feel like thinking about technology as an additional tool to kind of continue the conversation is a really, really good practice. But just another tool, not a tool or an end in itself, but just another kind of feather in the quiver.
Yeah, I think that's important. Technology isn't the tool. It's a tool to use along with education. But I wanted to thank you guys for coming out. You guys added a wealth of knowledge to the subject that I definitely would not have been able to cover myself. So thank you guys for coming out. Once again, guys, if you want to watch this video, it will be archived on the MSU's Bridge website, which is bridge.educ.msu.edu. We'll be able to watch it again. I want to thank everyone who was watching, and once again, I want to thank the guest speakers for coming out and giving us a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
So thank you guys for all the information.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.